Oh, hi there. This is Chandra Easton here, continuing on with my talk, Humanity Awaken. This is part two of a talk that's based on esoteric and also mundane astrology. I'm an esoteric astrologer, and in this talk, I'm looking at some of the global possibilities which might unfold. And I'm looking particularly at two of the outer planets and two of the inner planets of our solar system as they change signs during 2025. I'm not going to go on to 2026 because there's too much to discuss. We have arrived at a crossroads, a new era, and a new reality on Earth, and individually and collectively we must choose. Do we want, as a species, light or dark to prevail on this Earth, unity or separation? Are we going to live from a heart of compassion, or are we going to work with self-preservation? Okay, so just to recap in part one, and if you haven't listened to that, I'd advise you to do so. I did start talking about Pluto and its movement into Aquarius, and that started on the 21st of January 2024 and continues on. I did discuss Neptune's ingress into Aries. I talked also about the solar eclipse that's happening up in northern Canada in the Arctic Circle, 29th of March 2025. I discussed the significance of the planet Saturn as it comes into an alignment conjunction with the North Node in Pisces. And that part A, it took us up until April, around about 21st of April, so 2025. So I'm continuing on. And of course, I'm aware that that point in April is halfway between the Easter Festival and the Vesak Festival, which is always the peak of the spiritual energies on Earth annually. There's a beautiful image of Mount Shasta, and that was a lunar eclipse that occurred there in 2022. As mentioned, I'll be covering Saturn and Uranus. And the reason for this is that the outer planets move very slowly and they set up patterns that have long-ranging impact over decades sometimes. But I'm also looking at Jupiter and Mars and particular configurations that impact life on Earth in 2025. I had planned on talking about Chiron, but I've decided to leave that because what I wanted to speak about is more 2026. Okay, so these outer planets are changing signs. I've referred to it as the changing of the guard. And as I said, Jupiter and Mars that I'm including in this talk, Jupiter's a mid-range planet and Mars an inner planet. But I will start by discussing Jupiter as it's moving through Gemini, and it arrives at a point which we refer to as square the nodes. Now, Jupiter entered into Gemini in June 2024, but it arrives at crossroads in May 2025. And then the week after, Saturn moves into Aries. So humanity arrives at crossroads, and then a new cycle begins. The Saturn moves into Aries, and then, 6 weeks or something later, transiting Uranus moves into Gemini, where it will be for approximately 7 years. And then I will also discuss the very interesting configuration of Mars on the South Node in Virgo. And I'll use a few historical examples for that. Because, of course, we are all impacted by the planet Uranus, by the planet Saturn, and by Jupiter, Gemini, Mars, and Virgo. So you can see up here the top left, beautiful imagery of Jupiter. Beneath it is the divine messenger, Gemini. The center of the image here is Mars. This is a non-sacred planet, which tends to bring out the worst. And Virgo, the sign associated with the resolution of separation between male and female and spirit and earth. Okay, let's continue. So talking about Jupiter's movement through Gemini, as mentioned, it entered into Gemini. Oh, it's actually May. I thought it was June 2024, but it's May. And it stays there until June 2025, so about 12 months. And it arrives at a position square the nodal axis. Just to explain, the nodal axis is like a seesaw, and the south node is the past point, and the north node is the future. But as anybody who's tried to walk a seesaw when there's someone else on the other end knows it's fraught with danger. It can go up and down and you can get flipped off and hit the ground or fly up into the air. And Jupiter arrives at a crossroads with this seesaw, the nodal axis, on the 18th of May. Now, because of the orb, we'll start to feel this energy from about the 22nd of April, and it'll run through until early June. Now, on Earth, different countries and different regions and cities are demarked according to the 12 signs of the zodiac. So there's a couple of areas that are connected to Gemini in particular. But before I get onto that, I wanted to explain that any region that is experiencing division, think of Northern Ireland, you know, in the 70s and the 80s. It was the Republic and there was Northern Ireland. Think of Vietnam during the war, North and South. Think of Korea, still a North and a South. Think of the Middle East at the moment, Israel and Palestine. Any nation that's experiencing divisions comes under the influence of Gemini. And then because Jupiter is in Gemini, we refer to it as being in its detriment, which means that the lowest energy, it's a bit like, well, it's like a hot air balloon that's got a hole in it and it just can't take off. Jupiter's an expansive planet. And yet when it's in Gemini, it gets sort of earthbound and we can't realize the dreams or the hopes. Now, I've focused upon two places on the planet. One of the places that I focused upon is New York. And the reason for this is that New York has a very strong connection to Gemini and also a very strong connection to the world economy and any global trade agreements that may be made over the next year. Remembering, of course, that we tend to get the lowest vibration. The hot air balloon's leaking. So something that looks like it might fly may just come crashing to Earth. Not only am I going to refer to New York, but I also wanted to focus upon the Middle East. Now, Palestine and Israel, because of their divisions, have a connection to Gemini, as does the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. But Israel in particular, and the birth of the nation of Israel that happened in, what was it, 1949? I think that was the right year. Anyway, the natal chart, the planet Uranus, which is to do with change in that chart, is being activated by Jupiter and this conjunction to the nodes. So this potential for the big dreams, the hot air balloon, the wonderful inaugurations that we all hoped would be there for the Jewish people after the Second World War and the Holocaust, transiting Jupiter's revisiting that part of the Israeli chart. And of course, if you have a look at this map here, this is the hopes and the dreams for Palestine. The United Nations put out this map in November 47, and the green is the Jewish state, hopefully, and the orange is the Arab state, and the pink is Jerusalem. Well, of course, so much of this has changed, and now we know that Palestine is fighting for any square kilometre of land to live upon. So it's a place in high focus on the planet, as is New York. Okay, let's talk about the planet Jupiter, sacred planet of the second ray, largest planet, one of the largest planets certainly in our solar system, and it is associated with expansion and joy, inclusion. If you look at the 17 Steps to Perfections, brilliant meditation book by the lady Ananda Tarashan, you'll see that when you meditate upon Jupiter, then you strengthen within you the qualities of boundlessness or kindness or creativity. However, a failure to work with the Jupiter energy properly, which tends to happen when it's moving through Gemini as it is at the moment, means that you get an excess, or you get a flattening, a grief of the heart, or you get segregation or limitations or cruelty or conformity. So they're the downside. And of course, humanity have free will. So nobody knows how well humanity as a whole will rise to the challenge of accessing the highest vibration of Jupiter as it moves through Gemini. Now, Gemini, in its highest vibration, the sign of the twins, is associated with truth and skills and discrimination and networks and the higher reason when soul's involved. and dynamic communication. But in its lowest vibration, with Gemini, we can get lies or trickery or delusion. We can get nations or individuals separating into blocks, right or wrong, good or bad. We can get data, be swamped in data and algorithms. So, of course, Jupiter's been moving through Gemini, and we're all experiencing this. What to believe? What's truth and what's a lie? Which are the blocks that are acting from the heart? Which data can be trusted? How much do we give over our empowerment to the algorithms? All of these questions arise as Jupiter moves through Gemini. Gemini has many faces. In its things, the happy merger or the human being a vehicle for spirit. Okay, now what are the nodes or the nodal axis? Now the nodes, as I said, the past and the future are associated with our family tree, our biology, our history, our past lives, our racial history, our national history. Groups, a north node is associated with where we're going, with the collective group heart associated with heart-based gurus or teachers or significant people or individuals in our lives. So when Jupiter arrives at the crossroads, it says, well, what do you want to do? Go back to old patterns of the past, humanity? Or do you want to start new cycles with a redefinition of family, of humanity, of what it is that teaches us? So some of the possibilities of this Jupiter square the nodal axis is that we will build and maintain and establish and expand inclusive networks. We will act in a coordinated, creative fashion using our highest wisdom, our highest reason. We will expand and have great joy within families, and our capacity to communicate will be boundless. That's the best possible use of Jupiter and Gemini. But we do have to be very careful, as we have been for the last 6 months or so, since May 2024, that we don't separate and compartmentalize and go into national blocks. These ones are good, these ones are bad, these are right, these are wrong. We also have to be very careful that we just don't conform and give up our own innate wisdom. We have to be extremely careful that we don't place data or the algorithms or the artificial intelligence on a pedestal and call it the guru. And we certainly have to be extremely careful that we're not subject to historical delusions and so repeat the past. That's a bit of an image. Now, the nodal axis, you'll see, I'll just show you here. This is the south node, the lunar south node, and this is the lunar north node. And the bridge or the seesaw that goes between them is this path we're trying to navigate. And this is an imaginary path that is connected to the orbit of the sun around the Earth and the moon around the Earth. And there are two places where these orbits cross over, and that establishes the south and the north nodes. Okay. So let's have a look at the chart, and I'll just point it out to you here, where the Jupiter is. So there's the planet Jupiter in the sign of Gemini, the twins, and the square to the nodes is this red line here and this red line here. Okay, this is what we call a nodal mutable T-square. Now, the resolution point for that is the sign of Sagittarius, which means that we have to think big and look for the long-range best picture for everyone, rather than aligning ourselves in separatist camps. The planet Saturn is on the north node. I talked about that in part 1, and is also very close to Neptune. I'll be talking about that a little bit further on. So clearly the destiny point, the north node in Pisces, asks that we choose the higher way and the higher path where we sacrifice our personal, our personal gain in favor of what's best for the group. Other things that I would like to point out is the planetoid Chiron that's sitting in the sign of Aries, and I've cast this chart for New York. So only for New York, there's a potential for fragmentation and fracturing because the free will has a mind of its own. The reason I've cast the charts for New York is because I'm quite concerned about the global economy, and because of course, we've just recently had presidential elections there, and we wait to see how that unfolds. Other things that are important in this chart, and again, this is just for New York, is these dotted lines, the red dotted line that goes from the ascendant and the south node down to Pluto and the moon, up to the midheaven and Jupiter. So a good one, this is a pattern known as an SSS, or a sesquiquadrate, and a square. And a pattern like this is like a hidden detonation. It's like a landmine, and it's hidden underneath and has the potential to blow up in the face of the ordinary people so that they lose their freedom, but they may also gain some freedoms as any attempt to control them is blown out and away. There's a potential for disruption or segregation or holes in the hot air balloon of the North American presidency and the Republic. Yes, that's all I wanted to talk to. Yeah. So effectively, this particular pattern tells me that humanity, and especially North America, are up to our eyeballs in what we refer to as the Great Battle. And the Great Battle is the light of the personality facing the light of the soul. And this is in me and in you and in every human on earth. And you could say that the battle is between the best of humanity and the worst of humanity. And we have a face-off. Now, in previous times, in previous eras, battles were associated with weaponry and wars. But now we have a battle for the control of data, and a battle for the airwaves, and a battle for the algorithms. And we have a battle for you know, of course, we still have drones and we still have missiles, and no doubt down the track there will be battles for land and water, boots on the ground, all of those things. But another thing that, before I go on, I might talk to you about the 4 planets in Taurus. Now, the 4 planets in Taurus indicate that this battle that's going on Earth for the capturing of the minds and the decisions of humanity, it's got a great deal to do with Taurus, a great deal to do with money, a great deal to do with land, a great deal to do with power blocks. And so, of course, when I combine that with New York, I start thinking about the World Trade Center, and I start thinking about the stock exchange, and then I start thinking about Bitcoin and things like that. And I find myself concerned. Is that right? That I'm going to? Yes, I find myself concerned for many of those matters. Okay, let's leave Jupiter. Let's leave Jupiter there, square the nodes, and move on. This is literally the week after Saturn ingresses into Aries, and it will be in Aries for, what's that, about 3 years, 24th of May through till the 12th of April, 2028. So 2025 to 2028. So what is it? What does it mean when Saturn's in Aries? Well, some of the keywords for Saturn and the high vibration of Saturn are personal responsibility, collective responsibility, commitment, dealing with the reality, you know, the material world and where our feet have landed. From a meditational perspective, if we'd like to work with the higher frequency of Saturn, then you meditate upon the qualities of justice, endurance, and silence. But of course, if we're unable to access the Saturnian energy in its higher vibration for whatever reason, then individually or collectively or nationally or as a species, we make karma. We find ourselves limited. We feel as if there are restrictions placed upon us. We are disempowered or weak or subject to disinformation. That's some of the things that could happen with the low vibration of Saturn. Yes, and let's talk about Neptune here. Now, Saturn and Neptune, they're very, very close together as Saturn enters into Aries. Um, so Neptune in its highest vibration is extremely altruistic. It's like the mystical harmony with the highest and the most compassionate divine. It's associated with compassion or the Christ impulse or faith. If we meditate upon the planet Neptune and the qualities of purity, unity, or intuition, this helps us to cleanse and purify our astral bodies, our emotional bodies. But of course, we all carry history from the past to do with living life on Earth, and Neptune in its lowest vibration, we blindly follow. We feel guilty, but we don't act. We can't tell who's a false prophet and what's an authentic spiritual leader. We fall into despair. We become subject to pollution or viruses. We feel separated, disconnected, confused. Okay. This one here is Saturn. You'll see the cross of matter above the arc of receptivity, conjunct. And the planet Neptune is receptive to the divine realms with the cross of matter subjugated beneath it. Yes. Let's talk about Aries. First sign of the zodiac, does govern the capacity of the higher mind. I think the keynote for esoteric Aries is I come forth and from the plane of mind I rule. Aries holds a great deal of courage, action, soul freedom, new beginnings. And Aries is associated with Christianity and the Lamb of God. But in its lowest vibration, Aries is about, I want to be number one. It's all about me and mine. It's about aggression or attack or serving the self or feeling somehow or other that what's happened, that we've brought it on ourselves, or repeating old cycles, or beating the drums of war. Yeah, so some of the possibilities of these planets together, Saturn and Neptune together in Aries, you know, we feel frozen and with self-imposed guilt, or the warmongering, the beat of the drum, and the disinformation that's going out. It's extremely confusing to us. Or we feel bound in our old limitations and we repeat the old cycles. Or we blindly follow those who we believe to be authentic leaders who may turn out to be false prophets. Or we watch or we witness or we are caught up in religious wars. So, of course, all of this is happening on Earth at the moment. And the challenge for us is to reach the highest vibration. The highest vibration of Saturn and Neptune and Aries is that we have responsible new beginnings. We find courage and justice. We follow through with enduring action. And we have a compassionate view of the reality that we are living within. Okay, here's the chart for Saturn entering Aries. There it is there. There's the planet Saturn. Here's Neptune. So this is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. I have cast this chart for New York, as I said, because New York is one of the planetary centers through which the strong spiritual energies descend, and it has a great deal to do with the global economy. There are 4 planets in Aries, 2 pairs, Saturn and Uranus together. Will we follow our highest aspirations or blindly follow self-serving leaders? Venus is in Aries, which is also doesn't function well. It's in its fall in Aries, and there's a tendency for selfishness. And then Chiron, which has been in Aries for a couple of years, I can't remember the exact date when it moved in, is inviting humanity to heal the myriads of problems that we experience on Earth by correctly exercising our free will. Yes. What else can I tell you about this chart? Past for New York, I noticed the 15th or 16th degree of Scorpio. This is the cross quarters. The middle degrees of the fixed signs are greatly involved in this battle to see who and what we choose to control our evolution going forward, the light or the dark. The middle degrees of Scorpio are associated with embedded hatred. And of course, you know, this is what we need to move beyond harm and beyond hatred. We have Mars, square it. And another one of these detonation landmine patterns, the SSS pattern. Yes, there's the dotted red line there, the dotted red line there, and the red line there. And again, focused upon New York, that says, can we please have a catalytic new birth and a new beginning in North America? Because, of course, when North America was founded and seeded, it was founded and seeded through the transformational energy of the seventh ray, with the four freedoms. And this is what we're striving. Can America come out from the morass that it has descended into? And can its leadership do this to lead a way forward? And how will this be done connected to hatred? And how will it be done in the face of self-interest or monetary upheaval? These are the questions we have to answer. Yes. And is there anything else I wanted to tell you there? Mercury and Uranus are very close together in Taurus. Yeah. So we still must consider, and I'm hoping that by the time we get to May 2025, there are some, see the blue and the green lines? I'm hoping that there are some effective negotiation that's come from the American government, the president, to Israel and any other war-torn countries where the battle is around land and money and control and power and things like that. There is a certain possibility for breakthroughs with the blue and the green pattern, which is almost but not quite a mystic rectangle. But of course, the other likelihood or the other issue that can happen with this focus upon New York and focus upon the World Trade Center is that the supremacy of the central bank digital currency, which is arising, not of course just in America, but all over the planet. This is the move to the digital currencies. And, you know, the difficulty is that we've all seen, almost everybody in the last decade or two has had their email hacked or their bank hacked or their mobile devices hacked. And the more we put our lives into the digital world, the more susceptible we are for corruption and things to be taken out of our control. And so I am concerned about the central bank digital currency, the CBDC, and what sort of a foothold that gains and how it can be used over and above humanity to oppress. And while some people would say, well, the digital world is the future and there's nothing to worry about, and we can trust the banks and we can trust any central organisations that are set up to hold our data and our money in the cloud. The question I ask is, do we have ethical leaders in these positions? Okay, some of those Saturn-Neptune themes. The best way of understanding something about the Saturn-Neptune that we have together in May 2025 is to look backwards. So back in November 98, Saturn and Neptune were square each other. And I've just listed a few things here. Now, because Saturn is associated with karma, and therefore the board of karma, then I would imagine that the board of karma are extremely interested in the decisions that humanity make under such planetary configurations. So in November 1998, there was a massacre of tens of thousands of Albanians in Kosovo. The Serbians brought their army in. So is this on the negative side? Is this this is karma created? I would imagine so. In Indonesia, Suharto, who'd been a military dictator, I think, for a long, long time, decades, stepped down. This seems to be positive karma, doesn't it? In Chile, Augusto Pinochet, who'd been disappearing his people and had been involved in genocide, was arrested. This seems to be a very positive thing. And I'm just showing you some of the main events that occurred the last time Saturn squared Neptune. Now, this time we have Saturn conjunct Neptune, but still we're talking about these themes that impact nations and are crossroads and turning points. In Iraq, the Americans established the body, the United Nations SCOM. What is that for? And they're investigating the weapons of mass destruction. And of course, look at the date there. This is 98. This is a few years before the war in Iraq and a few years before the Twin Towers. But there's this sort of attempt to search for who's holding the weapons. Now, I don't know. Did this create positive karma or negative karma or a mixture thereof? Because we know what happened afterwards. America went into a war that went on interminably in the Middle East. In November 98, there were some peace negotiations between the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and the leader of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Arafat. Fairly positive, but did it last? Well, obviously not. Yes, so they're just a few issues just to give you some idea of the sorts of things that can occur all around the planet that land, I would imagine, at the feet of the Board of Karma. So we do have to be very careful. Okay, leaving the Saturn in Aries and Saturn Neptune conjunction, let's just look now at what happens when the planet Uranus, this is the sacred planet of the seventh ray, enters into Gemini, which on a hierarchical or a global level has a very strong connection to the third ray. Okay, so Uranus enters into Gemini on the 7th of July, 2025, and will stay there until May 2033. So what have we got there? 12 years? Quite a long time. Okay. This is the twins, the divine twins, Castor and Pollux, are the eternal twins. Beautiful, beautiful image there of Uranus's entry into Gemini. Now, Castor was killed. The mythology goes that Castor was killed in a storm, and his twin brother Pollux was overwhelmed and asked Zeus, that's Jupiter, to accept his life in exchange for his brother's. So there we have the theme of I am my brother's keeper. And whatever happens to my brothers happens to me. Now, out of compassion, Zeus immortalized Castor and proclaimed that Pollux would spend half of the year in the underworld and half of the year in the heavens with his brother. So there's another one of the themes that's connected to Gemini, this bridge between the world and the realms of spirit. This is the constellation Gemini. This is what Gemini is all about. It's about the bridge. You might say it's about the rainbow bridge. You could say it's about the Antakarana. It's about humanity finding and putting their feet upon the bridge or making progress along the bridge from the world to the realms of spirit. And of course, the symbolism of brotherly and sisterly love and the willingness and the capacity to sacrifice one's life for one's brother and sister. These are the themes, 2025 through till, what did I say, 33, May 33. Okay, so let's talk about the planet Uranus. Now, the planet Uranus is associated with electricity. It's associated with consciousness, wide awake, freedom, soul freedom. From the 17 steps to perfection, when we meditate upon Uranus, we strengthen the qualities of discrimination. We need this so much. Non-attachment and the capacity to give, generosity. If we fail to respond to the higher vibration of Uranus, well, we're just kind of sleepwalking into the future. If we're making decisions based out of our personality's free will rather than the divine will. We are subject to anarchy, to participating in or creating or supporting anarchy. If we don't have discrimination, we can be drawn into the algorithms and the digital prison that's been created by data the world of data or the CBDCs. And we could find that unwittingly our freedoms are limited. This is what we don't want. Remember, Geminis, to do with truth, skills, and discrimination, to do with the creation of networks, the higher reason, and as broad a communication as we can create. But the downside, because both Jupiter and Uranus are in Gemini, the downside of Gemini is the lies, the trickery, the delusion. So, and because Uranus in Gemini impacts us generationally, all the children being born in this era will have Uranus in Gemini. So we have a generation that kind of need to think for themselves, to escape the lies, the trickery, the delusion, not to get caught up in choosing a block or a side, not to believe that data is the new God, and certainly not to live one's life in cyberspace. We are flesh and blood. We have hearts that beat. We have consciousness that responds to electrical impulses from beyond the beyond. Yes, so very interesting years ahead, 25 through to 2033. So what do we do with this? We build discriminating networks. We consciously strive to access the higher mind so that we get the wisdom and the reason of our higher self. This is meditation. We strive to be non-attached and share whatever skills we have. Yeah? And we refrain from getting caught up in anarchy or blocks of anarchy. Recognize where trickery abounds that removes our freedom, and escape from the worlds of data and the delusions, the algorithms that these create. So I love this image here of the grandmothers weaving the net of light around the earth, because of course this is our opportunity for every single individual or group or family to participate in the weaving and the extending of the web of light. Here's the chart for Uranus entering into Gemini. There it is there. This is the planet Uranus with its ears out, looking to receive things from deep space, and we may well have profound breakthroughs in communication, in deep space. And Venus sits very, very close, 3 degrees away from it. It's very strong conjunction. So we have an allegiance of the fifth ray and the third ray on a soul level. Venus, the sacred planet of the fifth ray, it says, rise up, humanity, think for yourselves, access your higher mind and plug in to organizations or bodies of wisdom or ancient wisdom. So this is a call put out to all those light workers on earth to join forces, to work with the frequency of higher wisdom and the light of truth. Now, I wanted to point out to you a pattern here in the chart, and you'll see a green line that goes there. And that's a sextile from Gemini to Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, down to Pluto in Aquarius, another sextile, and down, and this chart's been cast for London, and I chose London because London is one of the major entry points for spiritual energies into Earth. And so on the 7th of July, when the conjunction, when Uranus enters in, the moon's in Sagittarius. And so there is set up a cradle. Can you see the cradle? Blue lines, surrounded by all the green lines. This is a cradle, and it's what we call a fire-air cradle, where we share and we collaborate for the best for humanity. And this involves networking and collaboration and outreach and extension and dynamically calling upon inspirational ideas and leaders. I'm hoping, because this is the UK, that there's something about the UK that can potentially lead the way. But of course, in order to do that, The Uranus is where the Leo ascendant, egos will have to get in the back seat. Now, when the Venus and Uranus are accessed by ordinary humanity, the theme for that is that we just want to belong somewhere, but we have to be careful that we don't blindly follow. Belonging is not a good enough reason. We need to make sure that our hearts resonate, not our need for belonging. Yeah. Okay. This image of the cradle and this very profound Venus-Uranus conjunction, it kind of reminds me of, the world servers, and they're found on every continent and in every walk of life. It's those who work for the for the dissemination of light. And just as the earth is a sentient being of light, we have within us our electrical circuits, our magnetic circuits, and when we activate them through goodwill, through being the best that we can be, through walking a mile in someone else's shoes, through extending our hearts and our minds, then we become vehicles for light. Yes, and the lady Ananda Tarashan wrote reams about right human relations, and I've just chosen this little teaching here, which Ananda's entitled Service is Truth and Love in Action, because it seems to epitomize the message that's going out when Uranus enters into Gemini. And Ananda says, to be able to serve selflessly is a great and necessary quality for any progress upon the path. It is truth and love in action. Truth, because anything that is given under false pretenses is of no good or service to anyone or anything. Only that action which is given with the fullness, honesty and sincerity can be called a true gift. And love, because love is the essence that binds us all together as one, that opens us to each other and to the Christ and the hierarchy, that shines the light upon our path. To be pure love in action is to stand forth as a Christed soul, the servant of the highest good. So this is the goal and the aspiration that we are all called towards. Yes. And as astrologers, when we're trying to understand something about the unfolding cycles ahead of us, we often look backwards. So previously, in the years from May 42 through till June 1949, that's the last time Uranus transited through Gemini. And of course, this is a very pivotal time in humanity's history. 1942, this was the year that the Nazi regime settled upon the final solution, the Holocaust, with all the negative karma that that created. The following year, Mussolini was deposed. The following year, the Allies entered into the Normandy campaign. The following year, in 1945, the Americans finalised their Manhattan Project and dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which effectively ended the war. In 1946, the Nuremberg trials. The leadership of the Nazis were held to account. 1947, the United Nations was founded and inaugurated. 1948, the Iron Curtain descended around Russia, the Soviet Union. In 1949, the nation of Israel was proclaimed. So it's very easy to see what a momentous 7-year period that was. And I outline that just to give us some idea of what a momentous 7 years is in front of us, starting from 2025 and going through to 33. And what we hope for is that the flags of all nations are included. You know, we have the Security Council that was set up 1947 and set up according to parameters that are, 80 years old. So I guess I have a question And what happens is that the the planet Uranus takes 84 years to circumnavigate the Earth and get back to the point at the beginning of Gemini. And so we're not quite up to the 84 years yet, but I asked the question, and when there's, and this is referred to as the Uranus return. And so when we have a Uranus return, we have to say, what has to change? Is the incarnation fit for purpose? And so I asked the question, by the time we get to 2030 or 2031, is the United Nations fit for purpose? Is it a body that is working to the best of the human's capacity for the 21st century? If not, it needs changing. And of course, its subsidiaries, the IMF and the World Health Organization, are they fit for purpose? If not, change them. Also, the same thing, Israel will be having its Uranus return in 2032. Does the nation of Israel, is it fit for purpose? Is it working when we measure it against the heart? Because, of course, as Ananda told us, it's truth and love that is the light of the way forward. And of course, if we don't learn from history, we are bound to repeat it. And everybody on Earth is being impacted by the momentous wars that are happening all over the planet, and therefore those who are working and holding vehicles of a light are working ceaselessly with the Holy Mothers to alleviate the suffering on Earth. Because we can't continue in this way, the creation of more and more wars and more suffering. Yes. Okay, but extremely hopeful that the disciples of Earth will rise up and participate with that activation of Uranus entering into Gemini. And so now the last thing that I wanted to talk about is Mars conjuncting the South Node in Virgo. So you might recall I said the South Node is the point of the past, and the planet Mars is a non-sacred planet that's generally associated with assertion and action and me and mine and wars and violence. Yeah, and it's impacting humanity via the very gentle sign of Virgo. The best of the sign of Virgo is that we are meant to be stewards or caretakers for the earth. We are not meant to be plundering, raping the body of the earth for our own ill-gotten gains. And certainly we're not meant to be going out into the solar system and plundering for ill-gotten gains on the moon or Mars or anywhere else. We're not meant to be spreading blood into the body of the earth through more and more wars. So that's the old story as Mars has been conjunct the South Node. Now, in 2025, it arrives there on the 20th of July, but we will feel this approach through the month of July, from the 9th through to the 31st. Okay, I'll show you Mars in the chart. Here it is. There's the planet Mars in Virgo. Now, Mars works best when we tend to our health and we tend to the holistic nature, the fact that we are not just a body or emotions or a mind, but we are a soul-infused personality. Mars works best in Virgo when we recognise that this earth is a sentient being, that the animals are sentient beings, and we would pick up the stewardship for the earth. When Mars is on the South Node, it says, humanity, do not repeat patterns from the past where you use the energy of war or selfishness against the feminine, against the body of the earth, against the creatures of the earth, or against the long-suffering working class. The working class have a great deal to do with the sign of Virgo. I have cast this chart for Jerusalem, and I did that because we have so much of what's hanging in the balance for humanity's karma is happening in the Middle East. You know, as yet, it appears that the genocide that's been occurring against the Palestinian people it has extended into the region, but it's of course into Lebanon. But we wait with bated breath to see what Iran might do, or Iran's allies. Yeah. If you look at this chart, there's a few things to notice. The cradle is still there. This is the disciples of the world working in concert to raise the levels of consciousness. On the 21st of July, the planet Jupiter in the wonderful sign of Cancer is stationary, not stationary, it's unaspected. Jupiter in Cancer has a great deal to do with generosity of spirit to humans, irrespective of clan or nation or race or colour, and yet it's not integrated, the Jupiter. So I think the question remains, do we consider ourselves a family of man, or have we split and separated and divided into blocks and perceive the other as the enemies? Mercury is part of the work of the disciples in the bowl, and it holds the imagery, the Sabian symbol, which is a sunshine after a storm. So let's pray that we have passed some storm by the time we get to July 2025 and the sunshine's emerging. The other thing that I noticed in this chart that I wanted to talk to you about was the ascendant. And this ascendant is only true for Jerusalem and the Middle East, but it's the 7th degree of Sagittarius. And the reason why I noticed that is that there's one of the fixed stars, Antares, and it's not marked here in this chart, sits conjunct astride the ascendant. So Antares is a starry vehicle for the Archangel Gabriel. Yes. So there's the beautiful cradle. And this is the task of the world disciples, to keep the network strong, to work with the Holy Mothers, to move beyond selfishness and fear and any degree of separation, and to provide succor, however and in whatever way we can do this. Beautiful image of the starry cradle. There's another image. This is of the sunshine after the storm. This is an image that's come from Iceland. Yes, and then of course Archangel Gabriel, who works through the fixed star Antares. Archangel Gabriel is known as the watcher of the West, and the archangelic energies are focused very strongly upon the Middle East, around this Mars on the South Node. And as one of the 4 archangelic stars, that's Antares, of our solar system, Antares stands as a sentinel of protection and justice for our Earth. It points the way towards the fiery realms of the inner worlds and asks humanity to choose wisely, the way of war or the path of peace. Long associated with ancient birthplace of Abraham and thus the Jewish people, through this impulse, the spiritual hierarchy hoped to bring to conclusion the racial issues with the Jewish and the Arab people worldwide, issues which have festered for more than 4,000 years in the history of humanity. So a great deal of karma. Ancient was, of course, the birthplace for the modern city of Baghdad, which I do find very interesting, that the Jewish people have their historical family ancient roots in Baghdad. So the Middle East is one region, one family. Yes. And we can work very strongly with Archangel Gabriel, Archangel who works specifically with this role of being a sentinel of protection and justice for Earth, and whose focus is very much around the Middle East. And again, trying to understand some of the possible ramifications of Mars contacting the nodes through the mutable signs, that's Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo and Pisces, I've looked back. And I've looked back over the last 80 years, and and Mars contacts the nodes often for a few times in a year, or sometimes 2 years, every decade. So I've gone back over the 80 years and I've started from the 1960s, just to give you some idea of some of the issues that in the past have arisen with this configuration. So in 1960, the global organization of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, it was created in Baghdad with Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. And I don't know, but I would imagine this body still holds a great deal of sway, you know, and here we are, what, 60, 70 years later, 65 years later. So there may be, and if we're looking at the karmic sort of, the border of karma, you know, what's been created that's positive karma for humanity, what's negative karma? Well, I don't begin to know whether OPEC has created positive or negative karma, but I do wonder about, you know, the cost of oil and the trillions of dollars that are involved in the power plays to do with who owns the oil. 1970, the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, blew up 3 airlines. They hijacked them and blew them up. So there's the resistance coming out of Palestine. And of course, you know, one would say that this is using the way of war. This is not going to create a positive karma for Palestine. In Iran, the Shah left after years of turmoil, and the revolutionary forces under the Muslim leader, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, took over. Well, again, I don't know enough about the politics of Iran to know, was this a good thing? Was this, you know, out of the fire and into the frying pan? But what I do know is that Iran still suffers from repression. So there are many issues still be dealt with around oil and, of course, gas, around Palestine and the Middle East. These are unresolved issues from going back 60s and the 70s that have activated and erupted like boils under the Mars nodal contact. So we can expect them to arise again. Issues with oil and gas, issues with PLO, Palestinians and Israel, issues with Iran. Afghanistan, well, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. Well, I suppose from the Russian perspective, they would have thought this was good, creating good karma. The rest of the world, you know, would probably take a different view. So we're not seeing much good karma created under this Mars nodal contact. In Britain, Margaret Thatcher became the new Prime Minister. And again, if I was British, I might have a better insight as to whether her overall prime ministership was a steadying influence or a repressive influence in the 70s. But I think there were a lot of strikes and a lot of deprivation. In Cambodia, well, this clearly was something positive, the collapse of the Pol Pot regime and the fall of the capital Phnom Penh. Yeah. So you can see in the 60s and the 70s, the karmic credit score wasn't that great, from my estimation. And of course, there's just a map of some of the places. This is a more modern map. It's got 2018 on it. The oil fields that still continue to control power and therefore money and governments. And of course, the pipelines. This is a more recent 2023 image, I think, of the pipelines. And we've seen during the war in Ukraine how the Russians have literally cut pipelines to hold aspects of Europe to ransom. Let's continue on with the 80s and the 90s. Okay, so on a global level, there was a NASA scientist, James Hansen, who warned humanity about global warming and the greenhouse effect. So the warning came, but, well, we're still dealing with this, what, 40 years later? Not much has progress occurred. So a good beginning, but still more to be done. In Pakistan, we had the first Islamic woman prime minister, Benazir Bhutto chosen to lead Pakistan. Sounds like a good thing. Again, I don't know enough about politics Pakistan to know whether this was positive or negative karma that was created for Pakistan. In America, George Bush Sr. And the Republicans rolled and had a landslide in 40 states. And again, I don't know enough about global politics to know whether this was positive or negative karma, but I'm just pointing these out to show you significant global events that occurred every time Mars and the nodes were contacted in the mutable signs. In the Middle East, there was a Hebron Agreement, and Israel came to the party and gave up a large part of the West Bank of the city of Hebron. But of course, we know that down the track, that's all been lost. However, at the same time as Israel did that, they began establishing Jewish settlements in East Jerusalem. You know, so we've got a mixed blessing going on in the Middle East, probably a mixed blessing in the US of A, I think a mixed blessing in Pakistan, and clearly unfinished business on a global level. So, you know, some good beginnings, but so much more work to do for humanity. And we see the work when Mars contacts the nodes in these mutable signs. Hong Kong, I think this was 97, or it could have been 98, finally was returned to Chinese. The British stepped out. So from the Chinese perspective, this appears to be justice and good karma for the British. China also established what was called a Human Rights Agreement. Now, this was 10 years after the Tiananmen Square massacre, and they banned arbitrary arrest and torture and protected freedom of thought and religion and expression. Sounds fantastic. But fast forward, 30 years, it's no longer there. There's been a backsliding in China, a backsliding in the Middle East, certainly a backsliding of stability in the US of A. There was a backsliding in Pakistan, a backsliding in the global issues. So a lot of these issues that start out well fail to deliver. There was a modest peace agreement between Netanyahu and Arafat, but again, we know that fast forward at 30 years, it didn't come to anything. And in Russia, there was popular uprising and protests, and Yeltsin resigned. Yeah. So we had upheaval and big systemic change all around the planet, but a large amount of the positive beginnings simply didn't deliver in the long term. So I outline that just because the way I look at it, this is unfinished karmic business. It's karmic because it's Mars, the non-sacred planet, activating the nodes roughly every decade for, a year or sometimes a year and a half. Yes. Okay, keep looking, 2007 and 2016, 2017, same themes. East Timor, fantastic. Finally, East Timor gained independence and President Ramos Horta announced Janana Guzmão as the Prime Minister. Long-awaited independence, clearly a big tick. In the US, USA were into Iraq. There was a deployment of 30,000 troops. This ongoing war bogged down in the war, in Iraq, that had started on such high moral grounds of the weapons of mass destruction, bogged down with death and chaos. In Thailand, there was a new constitution and elections to follow, and it ended a year of military rule that followed the ousting of Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. And again, I'm not up on the politics of Thailand enough to know whether any long-running ramifications has this positive impulse continued on. Because you see, every time Mars contacts the South Node, we try and oust the shadow, but it kind of inveigles its way back in. In Syria, 2016, 2017, the height of the Assad regime and the besieging of Aleppo, and the Russian military intervention, where the Syrian government were dropping chlorine bombs on its citizens. So I guess from Assad's point of view, this is protecting one's own territory, and Russia was helping. But from the rest of the world, what we saw was massacre, genocide. Yeah, so we have a long way to go. It's a slow, slow process, the lifting of humanity out of the morass of our own karmic makings. And I'm going to finish this talk with a few words from the Ladyananda Shan about the way forward. Because clearly, in order to find our way forward, we must operate from right human relations. And Ananda tells us that right human relations means what the words imply, treating all human beings with love and consideration. Right human relations begins with the principle of harmlessness, which itself would be enough to bring about peace and harmony, and moves to caring through service, and from there to a truly lived principle of the oneness of all beings and love for all, love as all. So we know what we need to do. We know we've got to be in it for the long haul. We know there's a lot of old karma that dates back through the decades and indeed through the millennium. But we have strength when we unite through the heart. Okay, that's the completion of the talk. And thank you for your time and your attention. And of course, at the end of this talk, I think I failed to show it to you. Maybe I'll quickly show it to you. The oh yes, I did have one more image there, and this is a reaching out. This is an image. It's a photograph from Derry City in Northern Ireland, and of course they had decades of revolution and upheaval and civil war, but they managed to reach out and bridge across the divide. And that's what we need to do, bridge the divide. And there are lots of different links here to various things that I've talked about, or different images that you can follow. And now I really am finished. Yes, and so thank you for your time and your attention. And I hope that you find something in this talk or the previous talk useful. That's all. Bye for now.